Once upon a time, there was a little engine called Edward. He lived in a shed with 5 other engines. They were all bigger than Edward and boasted about it. The driver won't choose you again, they said. He wants big, strong engines like us.
Edward is a small blue tender engine who works on the Northwestern Railway's Brenton branch on the island of Sodor. He has 4 leading wheels and 4 driving wheels, and a small boiler, giving him a low-slung look. But when was Edward built? When did he come to Sodor? And why did he come to Sodor? Well, let's find out. Edward was one of the first 6 members of the Furness Railway K2 class, and was built in 1896 to supersede the slightly older K1 tender engines on top-line express services. Alongside the later K3s and the much later K4s, Edward happily ran the top-line services for many years. By 1915, World War I was in full swing. Topham had set in motion the construction of the Northwestern Railway. This was possible since it was deemed good for wartime defenses, and it also became clear that an engine was needed for the bigger passenger trains. Searching locally, Topham came to the Furness Railway with the request. A deal was worked out, and what was initially intended as a loan became a full purchase of Edward. He arrived in 1915, shortly before the railway opened for services. Before we continue any further, I want to do a spec sheet like I did with Thomas. But as is clearly visible here, Edward is more or less the same from his K2 siblings, with the slight exception of his boiler pressure at 180 psi, which is the standard for all the Northwestern engines. Edward became the Northwestern Railway's first express engine, and ran so for 8 years until 1923, when Henry arrived. He was initially intended to replace Edward on the big trains, but he proved rather unreliable, so Edward was kept on, usually double-heading the trains with Lenny. He was finally replaced on express trains in 1924 when Gordon arrived, who took over the services. Edward was reassigned to local passenger trains on the main line, which he greatly enjoyed. In 1930, after the infamous court case with the LMS, the Northwestern Railway gained ownership of the former Wellsworth and Sudbury Railway. Since there had been many LMS engines working on that section, there was an immediate lack of power, since the railway was only left with Colin, Lilly and Adam. To help with the heavy load, Edward was reassigned to the branch shortly after the railway gained ownership of the line. Despite the rough past with the engines, they eventually gained respect for each other, and it definitely showed in their work effort. Even though there were only 4 engines, they gave it their best to keep it up. Nowadays, Edward is hard at work on the branch, and despite the branch being one of the island's smaller ones, it has grown to be one of the most profitable lines on the railway. This is greatly showed in the branch's roster, consisting of a whopping 8 engines, 10 if you count Bill and Ben. The roster consists of Salty, Boko, Derek, Gary, Colin, Lily, Adam and Edward. All of this prosperity to the branch wouldn't have been possible without Edward, since he gave it his all to keep the branch going until more motive power came. This has been an NWR prophilic look at Edward of the Northwestern Railway. Thanks for watching.